The envoy's arrival. The alarms hadn't sounded on Lunar Station Prometheus in 3 months, not since the ceasefire that nobody quite believed would last. So when Lieutenant Marcus Vale saw the lone Varnock vessel approaching on his scanner, his first instinct was to reach for the emergency beacon. "Hold," came the voice of Station Commander Zara Nightfall over the comm. "Single ship, no weapons signature. Let's see what they want." The Varnock ship was unlike anything they'd seen before. Sleek where their warships were brutal, bearing white markings instead of the blood-red war paint. As it docked, Marcus felt his hand instinctively move to his sidearm. 3 years of war didn't disappear overnight, even with treaties signed. The airlock hissed open, and out stepped a Varnock unlike any warrior they'd faced. This one was smaller, its razor-scaled hide dulled with exhaustion, and its massive claws were deliberately sheathed. Most shocking of all, it wore a translator collar, a sign of submission no Varnock warrior would ever accept. "I am Keeper Vex-High of the Twilight Brood," the alien spoke, its voice a rumbling whisper through the translator. "I come not as warrior, but as supplicant." Commander Nightfall stepped forward, her weathered face showing none of the surprise Marcus felt. She'd lost her daughter to a Varnock raid on Kepler 442b. Everyone knew her story. "Supplicant?" she asked, the word bitter on her tongue. Vex-High's great head lowered. "Our young are dying. A plague sweeps through our nursery worlds like fire through dry grass. Our medicine keepers speak of cellular collapse, of genetic unraveling. The translator crackled as the Varnock struggled with unfamiliar concepts. "We have exhausted our knowledge." Marcus watched his commander's face carefully. The slight twitch of her jaw was the only sign of her internal struggle. "And you come to us because?" Nightfall's voice was ice. "Because your healing arts saved the human colony on Arcturus Prime when our bioweapons failed to kill cleanly. Because your species fights death as fiercely as they fight us." Vex-High's massive form seemed to shrink. "Because we have nowhere else to turn." The bridge fell silent, except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Marcus could practically hear the weight of history settling on their shoulders. The Varnock had shown no mercy to human children during the war. Now they begged for mercy. For their own. "How many?" Nightfall asked finally. 50 million cubs across 12 brooding worlds, perhaps more." Vex-High's voice broke slightly. "They die within days of the first symptoms. We lose 3,000 young ones with each sunrise." Commander Nightfall closed her eyes briefly, and Marcus knew she was seeing her daughter's face. When she opened them again, her expression had hardened into something resolute. "I'll contact Earth Command, but I make no promises, Keeper Vex-High. We're not in the business of forgetting what your people did to ours." "I understand," the Varnock replied, "but I had to try." The volunteer doctor, Kira Voss, stared at the holographic projection of the dying Varnock cub, its scaled form writhing in apparent agony as cellular decay ravaged its small body. Around the conference table at Central Medical Command, a dozen of humanity's top xenobiologists debated the ethics of intervention. "It's clearly a designed plague," muttered Dr. Heinrich Morgenstern, adjusting his thick glasses. "Probably escaped from one of their own bioweapons programs. Poetic justice, if you ask me." "We didn't ask you," snapped Dr. Yamato Sato from across the table. "These are children dying, Heinrich, regardless of species." Director Patricia Wells, head of Xenological Medical Research, raised her hand for silence. "The question before us isn't moral, it's practical. Do we have the resources to develop a cure for an alien pathogen while our own colonies still recover from the war?" Kira had remained silent throughout the debate, studying the genetic analysis scrolling across her tablet. The pathogen was indeed artificial, but not Varnock in origin. The coding markers were unfamiliar, suggesting a third party, perhaps the Mysterious entities that had been supplying weapons to both sides during the conflict. "I'll go," she said quietly. The room fell silent. Director Wells frowned. "Dr. Voss, I know you have expertise in xenological immune systems, but my brother died at the Battle of Proxima Centauri," Kira interrupted, her voice steady despite the pain in her chest. "Lieutenant James Voss, 42nd Colonial Marines. A Varnok's sonic cannon tore his ship apart." She looked up from her tablet, meeting each pair of eyes around the table. "I know exactly what these creatures are capable of, but I also know what we're capable of." Dr. Morgenstern leaned forward. "Kira, your emotional investment in this makes me the perfect candidate," she finished. "If I can put aside my grief to help their children, then maybe we can finally end this cycle of hatred. Besides," she gestured to the genetic readout, "I think I know what we're dealing with. This isn't a natural pathogen or even a Varnok creation. Someone wanted both our species to suffer." Director Wells studied her carefully. "You're talking about traveling to their homeworld, alone, with no guarantees of safe passage." Keeper Vexai has provided coordinates to their medical facility on Shalthara, one of their smaller moons. It's been cleared of all military presence. Kira stood, her decision made. "I'll need a full portable lab, tissue samples from healthy human subjects for comparative analysis, and a fast ship." "This is madness," Dr. Morgenstern protested. "They'll dissect you the moment you arrive." Kira smiled grimly. "If they wanted to dissect humans, Heinrich, they had plenty of opportunities during the war. No, they're desperate, and desperate people, even desperate aliens, don't bite the hand that might feed them." Director Wells was quiet for a long moment. "Very well, but you'll take a full diplomatic escort and—" "No escort," Kira said firmly. "One ship, one doctor, one chance to prove that humanity is better than its enemies believe. That's how this works." As the meeting dissolved into logistics and preparation schedules, Kira remained behind, staring at the image of the dying cub. Somewhere in its alien features, she could almost see her brother's face on the day he'd volunteered for military service. "I hope you'd understand, James," she whispered to the empty room. "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is show mercy to those who showed us none." Among the dying, the surface of Shalthara was a wasteland of crystalline formations and methane storms. But the Varnok medical facility carved into the moon's largest crater was a marvel of desperate engineering. Dr. Kira Voss descended from her transport ship into a world she never imagined she'd see, a Varnok nursery in full crisis mode. Massive figures in modified environmental suits moved with careful precision through corridors lined with containment chambers. Inside each transparent enclosure, small forms barely the size of human infants writhed and struggled against the disease, consuming them from within. The sight hit Kira harder than she'd expected. Dr. Voss. The voice belonged to Healing Master Zekrin, a Varnok whose elaborate crest markings indicated high medical rank. Unlike the warriors Kira had seen in war footage, this alien moved with the careful deliberation of a surgeon. "Your arrival gives us hope we had thought lost." Kira set down her portable laboratory case, trying not to stare at the nearest enclosure, where a cub no bigger than a house cat struggled to breathe. "Show me your data, everything you've tried, everything that's failed." For the next 6 hours, Kira immersed herself in alien pathology. The Varnok medical techniques were surprisingly sophisticated, their understanding of genetic therapy decades ahead of human science. But they were completely unprepared for this particular plague. "Here," she said, pointing to a molecular diagram on the shared display. "The pathogen specifically targets the immune system's T-cell analogues, but only in juvenile Varnok. It's too specific to be natural." Healing Master Zekrin's massive head tilted, the Varnok equivalent of a nod. "We suspected artificial origin, but could not determine the source." Our genetic warriors created many weapons during the war, but none like this, because it wasn't created by Varnock, Kira said grimly. The targeting is too precise. Someone studied both our species extensively. She pulled up her own comparative analysis. Look at this. The pathogen has inactive sequences that would target human neural development. It's designed to cripple both our people's next generation. A low rumble filled the chamber. Varnock expressions of anger were unmistakable, even across species lines. The puppet masters, Zekrin hissed, using the human term for the mysterious third faction that had supplied weapons to both sides. They played us against each other while preparing to destroy us both. Kira nodded, then turned her attention to the task at hand. I need live tissue samples from the affected cubs, and I need to work with one of your genetic engineers, someone who understands Varnock's cellular repair mechanisms. That would be Tender Morgan, Zekrin replied, but she has not spoken since her own clutch spawn began showing symptoms 3 days ago. They found Tender Morgan in the furthest chamber, standing vigil over 4 small forms that barely moved within their containment unit. The Varnock's normally impressive stance was hunched with grief, her claws scoring unconscious patterns in the metal floor. Tender, Zekrin spoke softly, the human healer has need of your expertise. Morgan's head turned, revealing eyes that held a pain Kira recognized all too well. It was the same expression she'd seen in mirrors after James's death. Human. Morgan's voice was hollow through the translator. Can you truly help them? Kira approached the containment unit and placed her hand against the transparent barrier. The cubs inside were so small, so fragile. I don't know, she admitted, but I'm going to try. Will you help me? For a long moment, the 3 beings stood in silence, representatives of 2 species that had spent years trying to destroy each other. Then, Tender Morgan straightened to her full height. Yes, she said simply, for all our young. The Breakthrough 72. Hours into their collaboration, Dr. Kira Voss and Tender Morgan had transformed the Varnock laboratory into something neither species had seen before, a true fusion of human innovation and Varnock precision. Holographic displays showed impossible 3-dimensional models of the pathogen's structure, while alien instruments measured cellular reactions down to the quantum level. The breakthrough isn't in fighting the disease, Kira explained to the gathered Varnock medical staff, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. It's in teaching the cubs' immune systems to recognize the pathogen's deception. Healing Master Zekrin leaned forward, his massive form creating shadows across the laboratory. Explain this deception. Tender Morgan manipulated the holographic display, highlighting specific molecular sequences. The pathogen mimics the signature of healthy Varnock neural tissue. Our immune systems see it as self rather than invader. But Dr. Voss discovered that human immune markers can act as a guide, teaching Varnock systems to identify the true threat. You're talking about hybrid therapy, whispered assistant healer Cavrol, mixing human and Varnock biological systems. Such a thing has never been attempted. Kira nodded, understanding the magnitude of what they were proposing. I've synthesized human antibody templates with Varnock immune enhancers. Theoretically, it should create a cascade reaction. The cubs' systems will learn to fight the pathogen while simultaneously repairing the genetic damage. Theoretically, Zekrin repeated, his tone indicating the weight of uncertainty. We've tested it on tissue samples, Morgan added. The results are promising, but we need to try it on a living subject. The laboratory fell silent except for the distant sounds of struggling cubs in the medical bays. Everyone understood what was being asked and what would happen if they were wrong. I volunteer my clutch spawn, Morgan said quietly. Tender, no, Cavrol protested. If the treatment fails, if we do nothing, they die within hours, Morgan's voice cracked. At least this gives them a chance. Kira looked at the alien, who had become her closest collaborator over the past 3 days. In Morgan's movements, she recognized the same desperate hope she'd felt when James had volunteered for his final mission, the need to believe that sacrifice could lead to something better. "We start with one cub," Kira said firmly. "Full monitoring, ready to reverse the process if anything goes wrong. And Morgan, we do this together." An hour later, they stood around the smallest of Morgan's offspring, a cub barely the size of Kira's hand, its breathing shallow and labored. The hybrid treatment had been prepared with meticulous care, each component verified and re-verified. "Initiating cellular introduction," Kira announced, her hands steady despite her racing heart. The injection was almost microscopic, delivered through a Varnock bio-interface that made human medical equipment look primitive. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. The cub's vital signs remained critically low, its small form barely moving. Then, slowly, its breathing began to deepen. "Neural activity is increasing," Morgan reported, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Immune response is responding correctly. The pathogen markers are being identified as foreign." "Cellular repair is initiating," added Zekrin, his massive hands surprisingly gentle as he monitored the instruments. "Genetic damage is being reversed." Kira watched the readouts climb steadily toward normal ranges, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. "It's working," she whispered. 24 hours later, the cub was sitting up in its containment unit, tiny claws batting playfully at the monitoring equipment. Word had spread throughout the facility, and Varnock medical staff who had worked tirelessly for weeks began to show the first signs of hope. "Dr. Voss," Healing Master Zekrin approached as she prepared the treatment for mass production, "your people will be remembered in our histories, not as conquerors or enemies, but as the ones who saved our future." Kira looked out at the medical bay, where dozens of cubs were beginning their treatment cycles. "We all have a future to save, Healing Master. That's what I'm beginning to understand." The new teaching 5 years after the plague, Dr. Kira Voss stood in the observation deck of New Harmony Station, humanity's first joint research facility with the Varnock Collective. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she watched something that would have been impossible to imagine during the war. Human and Varnock children playing together in the station's central park. "The integration program continues to exceed expectations," reported Commander Jake Morrison, the station's human administrator. He was young for such a position, but the post-war generation had adapted to change with remarkable flexibility. "We now have over 200 mixed families registered across the colony worlds." "Mixed families?" Kira raised an eyebrow. "Adoption programs, mostly. Human families taking in orphaned Varnock cubs, Varnock broods, accepting human children who lost parents in the war. It's unprecedented." Morrison pulled up statistics on his tablet. "The psychological benefits for both species have been remarkable." Through the window, Kira watched a human girl of perhaps 8 years old carefully teaching a young Varnock, about the same developmental age, how to operate a gravity ball game. The cub's natural predatory instincts had been channeled into protective behavior, positioning itself between the girl and any potential hazards. "Supervisor Techmore sends her regards," Morrison continued. "The Varnock Education Council has formally updated their curriculum. Where they once taught hunt tactics against soft skins, they now teach human physiological awareness for protective protocols." Kira smiled at the awkward but well-intentioned translation. The Varnock language had no word for friendship, as humans understood it, but they had created new concepts to describe their evolving relationship with humanity. Protective protocols was their way of saying keeping humans safe. A chime sounded through the station's comm system. "Dr. Voss to Medical Bay 7, priority consultation." In the medical bay, Kira found Tender Morgan, now bearing the title of cross-species medical coordinator, working alongside Dr. Patricia Kim, a human pediatric specialist. Between them, a hybrid medical scanner displayed the health readings of a mixed group of children, both human and Varnock. Kira, you need to see this. Morgan's English had improved dramatically over the years, though she still occasionally reverted to her translator for complex concepts. The children who received cross-species medical treatment during the plague, they're showing remarkable adaptations. Dr. Kim pulled up a genetic analysis. The human children who were exposed to Varnock medical nanites are developing enhanced immune systems, not just resistance to human diseases, but to potential alien pathogens as well. And the Varnock cubs who received the hybrid treatment, Morgan added, show increased neural plasticity and social adaptation capabilities. They're learning human emotional expressions, developing what you might call empathy beyond their natural protective instincts. Kira studied the data with growing amazement. You're describing evolutionary adaptation in real time. Exactly, Dr. Kim nodded. The children are becoming something new. Not quite human, not quite Varnock, but better adapted to live together than either species was separately. As if summoned by their conversation, a group of children appeared in the medical bay's observation area. Leading them was a young Varnock that Kira recognized, one of Morgan's original clutch spawn, now grown to the size of a large dog, but still possessing the playful energy of youth. Dr. Kira, the young Varnock called out, using the informal address that the children had adopted. Will you tell us the story of the great healing again? Behind the Varnock, a mixed group of human and alien children gathered expectantly. This was their favorite tale. How humans and Varnock had saved each other from a common enemy, how mercy had conquered hatred, how cooperation had built something stronger than either species could achieve alone. All right, Kira said, settling into the role she'd never expected to hold. The keeper of a story that was reshaping two civilizations. Once upon a time, there were two peoples who thought they had to be enemies. As she spoke, she noticed Morgan documenting the session, recording it for the growing archive of human Varnock cooperative history. These stories, Kira realized, would be the foundation myths of whatever new society was emerging from the ashes of war. Outside the medical bay, New Harmony Station continued its slow orbit around the binary star system that both species now called home. In the distance, construction crews, human and Varnock working side by side, put the finishing touches on humanity's first interstellar exploration vessel designed for mixed crews. The ship's name, visible in both human script and Varnock symbolic writing, was Protector's Promise. It would carry the children of two worlds to the stars, not as conquerors or colonizers, but as guardians of whatever new life they might find. The greatest threat had indeed become the greatest protector, and in protecting each other, both species had discovered something more valuable than victory. They had discovered family.